Alright, we've got 2 packages in Mike Tyson Mysteries Season 2. I don't think Season 3 came out on DVD Blu-ray. Now this one, actually, I might be a little careful with this one. Because I think these have always been okay to show, but these are hentai DVDs, so just gotta... Yeah, okay. We got Hentai Heaven Volume 8, Big Sis and the MILF. Okay, Sinful Sis and MILF Assault Mode. Absolutely not for children. Here's Blu-ray and DVD versions. Pretty rare for both of those to arrive at the same time. And here's the real meat of the update, which is unfortunately just these 2 things. But you know, sometimes the weeks get lighter. This one, we have to check out if there's a sexy guy underneath the sticker. No, just a sexy 4 corners. Yeah, just in case you were into those 4 corners. But this is Space Battleship. Fuck, I couldn't pronounce this the first time. Season 2 plus OVAs. Because I couldn't remember if that was a T or a J. I'm pretty sure it's a T, a Tiramisu. Zwei being very, I think German for the word 2, but could be misremembering. We got a region A and B. We've got 13 episodes. We've got a dub. I haven't been looking at the special features for these for a while, have I? Textless opening, closing. Space Battleship Inc. Okay. Let's dig on in. What was coming out next month? I just ordered all of next month's stuff last night. Man, I'm really slow on that stuff. Remember some good stuff. What's coming out? I don't remember. I remember one thing that's coming out next week, but we'll wait for next week. Okay, that's 13 episodes. What's a kind of... I was going to say Sephiroth, but not Sephiroth. What am I thinking? I don't know. Some sort of RPG villain-esque sort of thing. People. Okay, what's the runtime? I am going to put this back in here. We're going to take a peek at the runtime because if it fits on one disc, then these are probably like half episode things. Man, I can't even... Okay, I think I'm just getting worse and worse at finding those. We'll just go to the next, which is The Stage Complete Collection plus OVA on Blu-ray. New English dub. Did Sentai release this? Yeah, Sentai released this. They're re-releasing some things that I think they've released before. This time with an English dub. That's one thing that's coming out next month. Waiting in the summer. Maybe it's somewhere later in the month. But that could mean penultimate or ultimate weeks. So, I don't know. I see a region A. I see an English dub. It'd be really weird if this includes all new English dub didn't have an English dub, huh? And I just feel a little piece of shit plastic right here that wants to come off and get put over here so I more likely to find it and throw it away. Alright. Disc 1. Disc 2. Well, that's a simple enough update. Here's this week's anime DVD collection update. So, keeping up the trend of me very slowly watching stuff, I watched 6 more episodes of Megalo Box. Entertaining stuff. I think last week I watched 2 episodes and wasn't quite sure what to think. And now I can say it definitely feels better than it did then. I'm not sure if to me it's necessarily, oh yes, this is definitely for sure classic, but it's definitely a very strong anime. Is there anything I can really say about it? I don't care too much about the opening theme concept per se, but this concept of, oh yes, this is our main character, he's just a wild dog, that's a pretty common thing, a pretty common theme. I'm trying to think if I can comment on anything that jumps out at me as like, oh yeah, like here's an example. For some reason I was thinking Wolf's Rain, and that's kind of the case. But maybe it's also not. I don't know. It's a character design that works fine for storytelling, but at the same time, as a specific focus, doesn't work for me. But I guess we're more interested in kind of the Megalo boxing aspect of Megalo Box in general. And it's interesting. They're coming up with... I don't know what I want to say. It's definitely... stuff. Anyways, I'm just kind of babbling. So, next up, my Friday friend, we finally... You know, we had a lot of weeks where we were off doing our own things, and we had a couple of movie nights where we were catching up on all these movies, some of which were complete shit, as you may recall. But now watching Naruto Shippuden DVD set 17. So 18 is there. But sorry, did I say 17? This is 37 and 38 is over there. And okay, so I had watched the first disc of this with him. We pretty much verified that, and we got into the second disc, which begins with a non-canonical flashback, as in like a non-manga source, which it was actually, it started out really interesting. It just kind of wore out its welcome kind of quick. It was basically another flashback to characters as kids, but it worked at the very beginning because it kind of told things at an age that we hadn't seen Naruto doing stuff before, that actually catches the spirit of what they presented Naruto's childhood as being like, in a way that other childhood flashbacks had completely failed at. In particular, it was very common for the series to say, oh yeah, he was kind of the lone fox, you know, kind of like Megalo Box, but he had the heart of gold that, you know, kind of learned this stuff. I don't know. So he evolved over time. But the point is, they kept having these childhood flashbacks where it's like, oh, but he's interacting with everybody his own age kind of normally anyways. Which feels like it's always been a kind of contradiction. It's like, oh, you can tell that stuff's not from the original manga source material or something like that. And maybe it isn't the case for all of them, but it was one of those contradictions. And this one kind of had a contradiction, but it's more like one of those things where if... There's a lot of series where you can kind of tell people had this general idea when they started, and then they really solidified on an idea later on there. I think Steven Universe is a really good example of this, where some of the early stuff didn't quite know what they wanted to do with the series, and then all of a sudden, bam, it just streamlines and starts going to the end. And it starts somewhere during the first season, so this isn't like a multi-season thing. And, you know, you can kind of feel that disconnect, and it's interesting, because that's probably part of the creative process. And at the same time, with Naruto, it kind of feels like that way, especially since I've mentioned this before with the other stuff we watched. It felt like the series didn't even really gain relevance until sometime in Naruto Shippuden. And I'm not even quite sure they knew they were heading that direction per se, especially with kind of a lot of the back and forth and stuff. It's hard to tell how much of it was the manga just, you know, exploring and having fun with this universe created versus, oh, we really need to tell a story with this. And in that regard, Naruto's definitely very hit or miss through the whole series, but it definitely had certain moments which are like, holy shit, they're really tackling this, and this is a very convincing and engrossing story. It's really quite interesting. You put 500 episodes in the series, and then all of a sudden, it becomes really fucking awesome. And then, you know, it's kind of a little wavery after that. And we get here, and I think I mentioned that I liked how they concluded certain things. And this is going beyond that. And the entire point is, the series became relevant because it's like, we got to make this story relevant about our main character, which it kind of sort of been doing in Naruto, but then it got sidetracked on a whole lot of stuff, and none of it was really relevant, and it was almost about everybody but Naruto. And then Naruto Shippuden, it kind of sort of was, and then it really was. And to get to that really was, it's kind of hard to think back to where they started Naruto the character at, because from a storytelling perspective, it isn't that. But that was what was nice about like the beginning of these flashbacks as a kid. This kind of felt like a Naruto who was a lone person, kind of looked down on by everybody else, but with a heart of gold kind of person. And I don't want to go into too many details about that, but that actually kind of worked out. The follow-up story sort of did. There's some parts of it where it's just like, oh, you know, if he really was that monster child everyone was talking about, that would have been really fucking scary. But I digress. But the problem is after that, it kind of goes a little more away from that. Now, when it talks about Sasuke and his relationship with his brother and his parents, that one is kind of still there, wholesome, but it didn't feel like there was a representation of Sasuke that we absolutely needed, and it just kept... It felt like it kept drifting away from that and more into, yeah, this is just what we do. It's interesting because it's kind of wholesome compared to a whole lot of other filler, but at the same time, it's one of those ones where it wears its welcome a little bit. But then it starts following up with another story, and we've only seen the first episode of that, but this one I think is more relevant because I think this is a final story arc that is covered in the manga, that I think is mostly about stuff that will set up the end of this series and bring us to Boruto. Now, whether or not my friend and I will watch Boruto is up in the air. After all, we are so fucking far behind on all of his watches. I mean, I've been meaning to watch My Hero Academia movie and Season 3 Part 1 and Season 3 Part 2, I think comes out in September. But even putting that aside, so much stuff, and he's far behind. I watched Overlord Season 3, he hasn't seen that yet. That's, I think, on his to-watch list. So much stuff, we keep falling behind. But for the most part, I'm looking forward to seeing where this final story arc thing goes, from the point of view that the end of the official story has happened as far as I'm concerned. This is an interesting side story that is so far possibly better than any of the movies. Although I would have to really think about the movies to know if I can even remember them all. Don't know if I even remember them all. And, you know, just see where it goes from here. And maybe I watch Boruto a bit on my own, or my friend suggested maybe we watch it dubbed. Which might actually work out. The reason we're watching Naruto Shippuden subbed is because when I first watched it, I was watching some downloaded episodes that somebody burnt onto CD for me, and I'd seen like, I don't know, 50, 70 episodes subtitled, and they really are very different characters dubbed versus subbed. But since Boruto is maybe for the most part a completely separate set of characters, maybe I can make the transition for the sake of my friend, because when it's subbed, he has trouble multitasking, and he really does have other stuff he likes to work on as well. Anyways, obviously I reached over and grabbed something else. I did watch Tyson Mysteries Season 2, and it's entertaining. It's kind of interesting because I had seen videos which talk about why Pigeon makes the series work, and I think maybe starting Season 2 that becomes the case more strongly, because there are some gut-bustingly funny things in Season 1 where Mike Tyson character is just like one step behind the entertainment value of Pigeon or something like that. And in this season it feels like maybe that's a little weaker, and I'm not exactly sure why. Maybe they didn't come up with quite the right material. It's possible that they're focusing their attention somewhere else, but fortunately for them, they have the ability to experiment a little like that, because the formula allows for some variety, some, I can't speak English, and they have Pigeon there to kind of solidify things. But I think what they were trying to do here in the second season is expand the characters of Young and the Marquis. In particular, and now some of the reasons why I didn't think they needed to do that is because Mike Tyson and Pigeon play, you know, the crazy silly characters, and Young and the Marquis playing the straight characters, the straight man to their, whatever you call the opposite of a straight man. That actually seemed to work because they had wildly different ways of being the straight man. Where Young was very often just the kind of straight man, and The Marquis was the Michael or Pigeon. You know, you had the sharp reaction, you had the giving up on life sort of reaction, and they're trying to play around with it a bit more. I think by trying to engage a bit more with Young's dialogue and to kind of define the Marquis as I'm just wondering if I am now grossly misusing the English language, but the Marquis is now the person who drinks a lot, and he does some smoking too. So he's, instead of throwing all that onto Pigeon, they're now dividing up between the Pigeon and the Marquis, which, you know, it's okay. It stays entertaining, but I feel like the first season had some of the stronger stuff. Season 2 still feels pretty good. Now, I'd like to say I'd be going on to seasons 3 and or 4, but I don't think season 3 got released on DVD, so I don't know what I'm going to do in that regard, because maybe I'd have to go on a streaming service and anyways, also watched Shazam, and I'm trying to remember what I was going to say about it, but let's see. I basically thought it wasn't as good as I thought it would be, which makes me think that the description I've heard of it as being a fun movie is about right. For the most part of what made it not as good as I would have thought is it's really a movie about assholes. I mean, like, early on in the movie, like 90-95% of people just seem to be assholes, whereas it kind of goes down to 66%. But it works because, for the most part, they're kind of fun assholes, and there's some stuff that gets set up well. So, for example, I really like the bad guy. I don't think he was necessarily a super sympathetic character, but there was some sympathy there. But at the same time, you're like, oh yes, he's just always been an asshole. But he was an asshole raised among assholes. And that part actually kind of surprised me because, you know, not knowing the history of the main character, who I think it was actually called Captain Marvel in the DC Comics, but now they're changing it to Shazam because it's a more distinct name, I guess. Anyways, the wizard Shazam, who gave the character, who isn't actually ever called Shazam in the show, but who gave the character his powers, turns out that guy's a pretty big asshole too. Surprisingly so, because, yeah, he was just an asshole. But that's the thing, is you kind of understood where he was coming from, and he's setting up something fun, which is both, you know, I don't know if I want to put it that way I was about to put it. But our main character, he's kind of an asshole. You have sympathy with where he's coming from some of that assholeness, but at the same time, you have to admit it. Stealing somebody's lunch is an asshole move. Even if you are a hungry-ish kid. Like, they didn't make him seem like he was starving, but they did make it seem like that was the main source of sustenance. Maybe. While he was on the run. Anyways, you have the adoptive parents that are kind of fun or kind of interesting, but they also have a kind of a scarily almost pretentious bumper sticker, and they start talking about their vegan food like that's the only way to live, and you know, it's different kinds of assholes, but you know, it's interesting because it's all there, and some of it works out surprisingly well. Now, there were a couple of things that I do find notably not as well, and one of them was just on my mind, but I forgot what it was. Oh yeah, of course. One of the problems I do have with the movie is I don't think they know what a 14 to 15-year-old boy acts like. Like, they're acting childish, but they're almost acting like they are 8 to 12, maybe? Like, they had this idea, oh, he's just a kid who has adult superpowers, but they kind of tend to forget that at 14 to 15, that's when kids are really starting to become adults. Maybe they're not always acting that way, especially since, you know, the way our school system is set up, most kids aren't really put in a situation where they have to act like adults until they are suddenly dumped into the world and they have to act like an adult. And what do? They mess it up. Well, not all of them do, but you know, this is like the problem with college age drinking and going too far in that regard. I think a lot of that just comes from kids have all this freedom and don't know what to do with it. Can't really blame them for that. You can hope people do better, but sometimes they don't know how to do better. Anyways, that is an extreme aside. Sorry about that. The point is, some of it doesn't seem like 14 to 15-year-old kid doing this stuff. Sometimes it seems like they're having these kids play as if they're much younger characters. But, you know, it doesn't completely ruin the fun. It's just one of those things where you feel a sort of disconnect there. But what was the other thing? No, that was the main thing, wasn't it? I've completely forgotten. Anyways, and I don't know if I mentioned liking the bad guy. And it was just kind of cool. There were some aspects of it that were a little disappointing, like you kind of felt like he should be more dangerous than he actually was, but for some reason he didn't seem to be. So I don't know what to do, because the way they planned the way they planned the story to flow, they wouldn't have really been able to they wouldn't have been able to make the more dangerous stuff work. So yeah, a lot of sympathy, because, you know, it's an interesting movie. Just trying to wonder if I want to comment about that, but nah, I'm not going to. So, what else is there to talk about? Well, I guess video game playing wise, there's been some random Super Smash Brothers. It's interesting that my nephew is finally getting both better and worse at the game at the same time. Because now, I mean, I think he's always played as Samus, but now he's getting really good at kind of jumping and shooting and hitting computer players when they're off the edge of the screen. You know, that's, you know, it shows some really good hand-eye coordination, some good mental mapping of, you know, this is me, this is where I am, this is how I move. But he also does occasionally get lost, and he does tend to fall off the stage quite a bit more, so it's interesting. But, you know, needs to keep getting better, I guess. I did do a thing yesterday where the gaming committee at work, I'm a member of the gaming committee, so I'll always do most of their stuff as long as it's within my scheduling ability. We did this open arena sort of thing. Think Super Smash Brothers, but we're trying to open it up mostly to games like that, where you put a bunch of people in a thing and they're competing against each other. And the ultimate example we were using as a point of advertisement to see if we could get people to show up was Super Bomberman for the Super Nintendo. So I think I might have mentioned that before, that I have see, I pack up a lot of my video game stuff in coolers, because then they have handles, and I put in this American flag one, my Super Nintendo and stuff. So I was able to bring a multi-tap and Super Bomberman 2, and there was some of that. But there was also a couple of other games. Some game that's sort of Smash-like, but played with sprites, and the characters are very, they're mostly furry kind of stuff. I don't have a better word for, anthropomorphic may be a better word for it. I've been trying to think of a better word all week. Well, anyways, I'm not going to edit that out because I'm a lazy shit, but it had mostly anthropomorphic characters in it, and Shovel Knight. We also played some Indie Pogo, which has a bunch of indie characters, including Shovel Knight. And we played Duck Game, which is really fun because there's a button that allows you to quack. The controls are shit, but it's shit for everybody, so it's kind of fun. Especially when you win and you can quack. So, you know, fun stuff. But I don't know that I can really comment about too much else, because the truth of the matter is, I lost a lot of the weekend to the fact that I ate way too much on Saturday night. Like, you gotta be careful of Tex-Mex food. Anyways, I've been blabbering on long enough. I can't think of anything else I'm going to talk about. I don't know what we're going to stream tonight, because it's not going to be Marvel Ultimate Alliance, because what's his face, Braylon, is feeling sick. So we're going to do something else, and I don't know what. We'll figure it out. But maybe most of y'all, my subscribers, don't care about that. And y'all have a nice week.